Now at 6, police releasing new details in the death investigation of Coral Springs Vice Mayor. Investigators say her husband shot and killed her and then slept in their house with her body upstairs.
We're following breaking news tonight. The vice mayor of Coral Springs, Nancy Metayer Bowen, was found dead in her home.
In Coral Springs is reverberating around Florida, including here in Tampa Bay. The city's vice mayor, Nancy Metayer Bowen, was found dead in her home, and her husband is now charged with murder.
Yeah, people across the state knew her because she was about to announce a run for Congress.
Right now at 7, the Coral Springs community is continuing to mourn the loss of its vice mayor. There was a march for peace, and that's what you're looking at right here on your screen, in her hometown to honor the vice mayor's legacy.
Hi, I am Commissioner Nancy Metayer.
Hundreds of people got together tonight at Coral Springs City Hall to honor Vice Mayor Nancy Metayer Bowen. The 38-year-old was found dead in her home after police say her husband shot and killed her. Tonight, we're also hearing the 911 call made by the husband's uncle.
Okay, my nephew, her husband, came to my house this morning and told me that he did something to her.
Okay, her husband?
Is he alive? He said no.
Her husband?
Yes.
There are no words that can truly capture the depth of this loss or the pain this organization and community are now dealing with.
Those were the words of someone who knew Nancy Metayer Bowen well. He really robbed us. She was working hard, doing good work, and we never imagined that she was living in personal hell. Personal hell. That phrase, from Nancy Metayer, who led the leadership development program that had selected Nancy as a participant, is the one that forces the full picture of this story into view. Because from the outside, from the perspective of every person who worked alongside Nancy Metayer Bowen in Coral Springs, in Broward County, in the Florida Democratic Party, in the environmental justice community she had spent her career building, there was no visible indication of what was happening inside her home. She showed up every day to meetings, to briefings, to community events, to leadership summits where party chairs held her in hugs, to rooms full of elected officials who admired her, to conversations with constituents who felt in her presence that someone was actually listening to them. She was vice mayor. She was the first Black and Haitian American woman ever elected to the Coral Springs City Commission. She had a master's degree from Johns Hopkins. She had survived hurricanes through her work on water crises and disaster relief. She had just been named vice chair of Haitian American voter engagement for the Florida Democratic Party. She was 2 days away from announcing her run for Congress, and nobody, not her mentee who she drove to her first advocacy event, not the party chair who hugged her at a summit 2 weeks before, not the colleague who texted her on Wednesday morning about discussion items and never heard back, not the city manager who called her the light in every room she entered.
There are no words that can truly capture the depth of this loss or the pain this organization and community are now dealing with.
Nobody saw what was happening in the house on Northwest 127th Avenue after the doors were closed. On the night of Tuesday, March 31st, 2026, Stephen Bowen, 40, her husband of 4 years, ended her life inside their home in Coral Springs. He is charged with premeditated murder and tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. He is held without bond at Broward County Jail. And on Friday, April 3rd, hundreds of people filled the front lawn of Coral Springs City Hall for a candlelight vigil in orange, her favorite color, the color of Florida A&M, the university where she started. That is where the lights were supposed to be, not here. Stay with me. If you are watching this for the first time, subscribe right now, because this channel exists for people like Nancy Metayer Bowen, who gave everything to everyone, who deserve so much more time. Subscribe and stay with me. Let us begin with the most current details, because the arrest affidavit released by Coral Springs Police tells a specific story of that Tuesday night and Wednesday morning that the public needs to understand fully. Stephen Bowen, 40, was booked at Broward County's main jail on charges of first-degree premeditated murder and tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. He made his first appearance in Broward County Bond Court, where a judge found probable cause and ordered him held without bond. He invoked his right to an attorney when taken into custody.
It was a quick hearing in court today. Stephen Bowen was denied bond after being accused of killing his wife. And today, her family is remembering her as an advocate and a leader.
Mr. Bowen, good morning, sir.
Stephen Bowen was the first person on the docket in bond court. Bowen is charged with premeditated murder and tampering with fabricated evidence. After police found his wife, Bowen was booked into the main Broward jail in Fort Lauderdale yesterday.
Online court records do not list a defense attorney as of the most recent reporting. The investigation remains active and ongoing. The arrest affidavit released by the Coral Springs Police Department contains details that are essential to understanding the legal case being built against Stephen Bowen. According to the affidavit, investigators determined that Stephen Bowen ended Nancy's life during the night of Tuesday, March 31st. The following morning, when colleagues could not reach Nancy and texted Stephen asking him to have her call, he responded. He said he had texted her, that she was not picking up. He later added, "Where is she? Her car is not at home." He had been in that house all night. The affidavit states that Stephen Bowen's mother told investigators he had spoken with her on Tuesday afternoon about having a panic attack at work, that he told her he was going to speak with his wife about it. His mother said she was not aware of any marital issues between the couple. When police arrived at the home for a wellness check that Wednesday morning, they found no cars in the driveway, no response from inside. A detective who surveyed the exterior of the property noticed damage on the second floor, described as outward, explosive-like damage consistent with force originating within the structure, and damage caused by projectiles. While officers were outside the home, they spotted Stephen Bowen's vehicle in a parking lot. They observed him handing a bag to another individual, a bag that appeared consistent with a firearm carrying case. At approximately the same time, a person whose name is redacted in the affidavit called police and reported that their nephew, Stephen Bowen, had come to their home that morning and told them he had done something to his wife, that she was not alive.
Okay, my nephew, her husband, came to my house this morning and told me that he did something to her.
Okay, her
I said,
husband?
"Is he alive?" He said no.
Her husband?
Yes.
That information allowed police to enter the home without waiting for a search warrant. Nancy Metayer Bowen was found in the second floor bedroom. The tampering charge tells its own story. The man Stephen Bowen attempted to hand the firearm bag to was a fellow Freemason. Bowen had contacted him and said they should meet. He told investigators they were meeting to discuss an upcoming Masonic meeting. According to investigators, Stephen Bowen removed the license plate from his truck and asked his fellow Mason to take a gun bag and ammunition boxes. He was attempting to distance himself from the evidence before the body was found. That is not the behavior of someone in the immediate shock of a moment that spiraled. That is calculated. It is planning, and it is what the tampering charge reflects. On Friday, April 3rd, a candlelight vigil was held on the steps of Coral Springs City Hall. It was not a city-organized event. It was organized by Nancy's friends, her community, the people who loved her. City officials were expected to attend. Hundreds came. They wore orange, Nancy's favorite color. They held white candles. Speakers included members of Florida's congressional delegation, state legislators, dozens of Broward County elected officials, and community leaders from across South Florida. The service was streamed online and translated into Creole.
It means a lot. It means to show you who Nancy was to so many of us.
The Metayer family had a front row seat to the outpouring of love, which came with a flood of emotion.
Grieve how you gotta grieve.
Her family has been dealing with this pain for days.
Rep. Jared Moskowitz, who had seen Nancy days before her passing, spoke directly. Nancy would have won that race. He and Rep. Wren, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, said they would go to the floor of the United States Congress, the body Nancy would have been a member of, and speak her name there. Drop a comment right now. One word. Tell me how you are feeling. I read every single one. Let us start with who she was before any of this. Because Nancy Metayer Bowen deserves to be known as a complete person, not as a victim, not as a headline, not as a case that shocked a state. She was 38 years old. She was born in Haiti and raised in South Florida, part of the Haitian American community that is woven into the fabric of Broward County in ways that are often invisible to people who do not know where to look. She grew up understanding what it meant to be part of a community that had to fight to be seen And she decided early that fighting was something she was going to do on behalf of that community and every community that needed someone to fight. She earned a Bachelor of Science from Florida A&M University, a historically black university in Tallahassee, the one whose colors are orange and green and whose spirit she carried into every room she entered for the rest of her life. She then earned a Master of Health Science from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, one of the most prestigious public health programs in the world. She used that education the way it was meant to be used. Not for personal advancement, for people. She worked on Haiti relief. She took a job with Broward County as a program manager with the Junior Sustainability Stewards Program. She was elected to the Broward Soil and Water Conservation District in 2017, a technical, unglamorous role that most people do not know exists, but that is essential to protecting the water and land that communities depend on. She led environmental justice efforts across the state of Florida. She helped communities respond to Hurricanes Irma, Michael, and Dorian, showing up to disaster scenes and staying until the work was done. And in 2020, she ran for the Coral Springs City Commission. She won. She became the first Black and Haitian American woman ever elected to that body. In 2024, she ran for re-election. She ran unopposed. In November 2025, her fellow commissioners appointed her to serve a second term as vice mayor. The Florida Democratic Party named her vice chair of Haitian American voter engagement. The Biden campaign tapped her to lead Florida Caribbean Vote Director Outreach. The Harris campaign did the same. She was building towards something. Everyone around her could see it. When you are on Team Nancy, one friend said at the vigil, you are never off Team Nancy. That is who she was. If this story has reached you, share it right now. For Nancy, so that her name travels further than a candlelight vigil in Coral Springs. Share it. Nancy Metayer Bowen and Stephen Bowen were married in 2022. He was listed on the Florida Division of Corporations website as the Chief Operating Officer of Men of St. Luke, a Broward County faith-based nonprofit that describes itself as focused on creating a community for fellowship and discipleship among men who want to live life successfully in the eyes of God. Recent events the organization had hosted included a Bible study huddle and a steak night. He was also a licensed radiology technician listed in the arrest affidavit as employed at Delray Medical Center. His public-facing persona was one of faith and community and marriage. His Instagram account, KingsB85, contained posts featuring him and Nancy, including two celebrating their anniversary. One of Nancy's own posts from their second anniversary read, 2 years with the amazing Stephen Bowen. Cheers to love, growth, and building a beautiful life together. Building a beautiful life together. Those were her words about her marriage. But here's what else was on Stephen Bowen's Instagram. Multiple posts showing him with firearms, photos at shooting ranges, documentation, voluntary, public, deliberate of a man who had made guns a significant part of his identity. And his Instagram bio, visible publicly at the time of the arrest, contained 3 words: God, husband, armed. Nancy Metayer, who had worked alongside Nancy in professional context for years, said what people who loved Nancy are now wrestling with. We never imagined she was living in personal hell. For an elected official who was as visible and as engaged as Nancy Metayer Bowen, who attended events, who gave speeches, who was photographed at summits and community gatherings and party meetings, the private reality of her home life was entirely concealed from everyone who knew her publicly. That invisibility is one of the most important and most difficult dimensions of this case. Because if the people closest to Nancy's professional life, her party chair, her fellow commissioners, her mentees, saw nothing, that tells you something specific about how well she compartmentalized, about how much she was carrying, and about how isolated the experience of what was happening in that house must have been. To understand what Nancy was carrying into that Tuesday night, you need to know what the year before it looked like. In December 2025, Nancy's younger brother Joshua Metayer died by suicide. He was 26 years old. He had spent years battling schizophrenia, and he carried something else, something that his family will carry alongside his memory forever. Joshua Metayer was a survivor of the February 14th, 2018 mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. He survived that day, He went on to battle the psychiatric aftermath of what that day did to him, and in December 2025, he could no longer carry it. Nancy buried her brother, and she kept showing up. To meetings, to community events, to the Florida Democratic Party Leadership Summit where Nikki Fried held her in a hug 2 weeks before her passing, to the conversations about running for Congress, conversations that were getting louder and more serious, conversations that the people around her were enthusiastic about. Her family had been going through so much in the last few months, a close friend said. She was going to fight in the United States Congress for the things she believed in, for control, for the environment, for women's reproductive rights, for mental health issues. Mental health issues! She was going to fight for mental health resources in Congress because she had just watched what the absence of adequate mental health support had done to her own brother, and she kept showing up. The specific weight of grief and public responsibility that Nancy Metayer Bowen was carrying in the months before April 1st, 2026 is something that deserves to be acknowledged, not as an explanation for anything, but as an honest accounting of who Nancy Metayer Bowen was, a woman carrying the loss of her brother and the demands of public office and the private reality of her marriage, and still getting up every day and doing the work. Tuesday, March 31st, 2026, according to the arrest affidavit, Stephen Bowen told his mother that afternoon that he had experienced a panic attack at work, that he was going to speak with his wife about it. His mother said she had no knowledge of any marital issues between the couple. That night, inside the home on the 800 block of Northwest 127th Avenue in Coral Springs, Nancy Metayer Bowen lost her life. The affidavit does not detail the full sequence of what happened inside that home that night. What it documents is the aftermath, what investigators found. What Stephen Bowen told the people he went to the next morning, he left the house. He drove to his uncle's home. He arrived around 10 a.m. Wednesday. He told his uncle he had done something to his wife, that she was not alive. His uncle asked if he had shot someone. Stephen Bowen said he had, 3 times. The night before, his uncle asked why. He couldn't take it anymore, the affidavit states. Meanwhile, at Coral Springs City Hall, Nancy's absence was becoming impossible to ignore. She had missed a morning meeting. City staff texted her, no response. They texted Stephen. He said he had texted her. That she was not picking up, he said he did not know where she was. That her car was not at home. The lies were being constructed in real time while he was at his uncle's house, having already admitted the truth. A relative called 911. Tell them to break down the door by whatever means, a voice said on the recording released Friday. Police entered the home. They found Nancy Metayer Bowen in the second-floor bedroom. The investigation that followed moved quickly. License plate readers tracked Stephen Bowen's vehicle. A tip led officers to a parking lot where he was observed handing a bag to another man. By 2:35 p.m., he was in custody at a Plantation apartment complex. He invoked his right to an attorney. He has not spoken publicly since. The word premeditated appears in Stephen Bowen's charges, and the evidence that prosecutors will rely on to establish that premeditation in court is already documented in the arrest affidavit. Premeditation in Florida does not require days or weeks of planning. It requires proof that a defendant had time to think, even briefly, to form the conscious intent to act before acting. The affidavit describes a pillow found at the scene with burn marks and string, fashioned, investigators say, as if it were a makeshift silencer. A makeshift silencer. That is not an impulsive act.
Earlier today, April 1st, 2026, we initiated an investigation into the well-being of Vice Mayor Nancy Metayer Bowen at approximately 10 a.m. this morning. The investigation, through investigative techniques, we arrived at her residence at around the 800 block of Northwest 127th Ave. Once at the residence, we did locate the body of a deceased black female that we identified as Vice Mayor Nancy Metayer Bowen. This is being investigated as a domestic violence incident. Her husband, Stephen Bowen, is in our custody. There are no additional suspects at this time, and there are no immediate threats to anyone in the public.
You do not fashion a makeshift silencer in the middle of a spontaneous confrontation. You prepare it. You think about it. You decide in advance that you are going to try to suppress the sound of what you are about to do. 3 spent shells were found at the scene. In the morning, Stephen Bowen removed his license plate from his truck. He reached out to a fellow Freemason under the pretense of discussing an upcoming meeting. He asked that person to take a bag and ammunition boxes. He was managing evidence, concealing the weapon, constructing a cover that collapsed within hours because his uncle told the truth. The tampering charge exists alongside the murder charge because prosecutors believe they can prove that Stephen Bowen made deliberate, sequential decisions to conceal what he had done from the moment he left that house. That is not the behavior of someone overwhelmed by a moment. That is the behavior of someone who had already decided, before officers ever knocked on a door, how they were going to handle the aftermath of what they had done. On Thursday, April 3rd, the day that was supposed to be Nancy's congressional announcement, Rep. Jared Moskowitz stood at the vigil on the steps of Coral Springs City Hall and said it out loud. Nancy would have won that race. She was preparing to challenge Rep. Sheila Sherphillis McCormick for Florida's 20th congressional district. That is not a minor statement. Florida's 20th is a majority-minority district, a seat held by a Haitian American congresswoman. For Nancy Metayer Bowen, with her Johns Hopkins degree, her environmental justice credentials, her deep Haitian American community roots, her track record in Coral Springs, her connections to the Biden and Harris campaigns, her role as Florida Democratic Party vice chair. The race was one she was genuinely positioned to compete in and potentially win. The people around her could see it. She was so excited, a friend who has known her for nearly a decade said. She was getting support from local leaders and elected officials, from family and friends. She was going to fight for control, for the environment, for women's reproductive rights, for mental health. She wanted to fight for gun control in Congress. The irony embedded in that sentence is one that her community is trying to figure out how to sit with. Rep. Moskowitz, who represents Florida's 23rd district and who knew Nancy personally, announced at the vigil that he and Rep. Debbie Wasserman Schultz would go to the floor of the House of Representatives and speak her name. We will go to the floor of the body she would have been a member of, and we will talk about Nancy. She would have been a member of that body. She should have been. Pause right here. Hit the like button for Nancy Metayer Bowen so that her story reaches every person who needs to hear it. This case demands an uncomfortable conversation about something that is rarely discussed directly. Domestic violence does not discriminate by professional achievement. Nancy Metayer Bowen had a master's degree from Johns Hopkins. She had survived hurricanes. She had run for office. She had been re-elected unopposed. She was 2 days from announcing a congressional campaign. And she was, according to the people who knew her, living in personal hell behind the closed doors of her home. The research on domestic violence among high-achieving women is clear, and it contradicts every assumption that professional success provides protection. A 2024 study of intimate partner violence found that women in positions of public authority experience domestic at rates comparable to the general population, but are significantly less likely to report it, seek help, or leave. The reasons are consistent across studies. Fear of professional consequences, fear of not being believed, fear that the revelation of what is happening at home will undermine the credibility, the authority, the identity that has been built at enormous personal cost. A woman who is the first Black and Haitian American person to hold her position, who understands at a visceral level how much harder her path has been, how much more is riding on her success, how much scrutiny she is already under, may feel that admitting what is happening at home is a risk she cannot afford to take. That calculation is wrong, not because the fear is irrational, because the fear is entirely rational given how society treats survivors of domestic violence, but because the outcome of staying silent, as we are watching in Coral Springs this week, is more dangerous than the outcome of asking for help. Florida's domestic violence hotline is 800-500-1119. For Nancy, we do not know what she had access to. We do not know what she tried. We do not know what conversations happened behind the closed doors of that house. What we know is that the people who loved her professionally and personally saw nothing, and that the city flag is flying at half-staff outside City Hall. If you are in a domestic situation, please call 800-500-119. For Nancy, for everyone who did not call in time. Share this video right now, because this conversation about how domestic violence resides in the lives of the most accomplished women is a conversation that this case demands we have. Share it. On the night of the vigil, City of Miami Mayor Eileen Higgins said something that captures what Nancy Metayer Bowen was in the community she served. Every day Nancy got up and she fought to make our planet better and the places we call home more equitable for everyone who lives in them, and to lift every single person, whether she knew them or didn't know them, up. That is a specific kind of public service, not the kind that shows up for the cameras and disappears when the cameras leave, the kind that drives a young mentee to her first advocacy event, the kind that answers the question, what are we going to do to help the people, every single time it comes up. Christelle Luador, who founded the nonprofit Gen Z Poo Aidi and who Nancy had driven to that first event, spoke at the vigil and said what Nancy had meant to her personally. Nancy showed me what it truly means to advocate. Not to speak, but to stand. Not to care, but to also act. She called purpose out of me, and she taught me how to carry myself. She called purpose out of people. That is the legacy of Nancy Metayer Bowen in the city she served and in the lives she touched. Not just the policies, not just the votes, not just the historic firsts, though those matter enormously. The specific individual moments where a young person in a new space felt Nancy's presence and understood what it meant to show up. The investigation is ongoing. The Madison County District Attorney's Office, the Broward County State Attorney's Office, is building the case against Stephen Bowen. No trial date has been set. The legal process is in its earliest stages. What happens in a courtroom will take time. What happens in Coral Springs, in the community that is already raising questions about how this was possible, already demanding accountability, already gathering on City Hall steps in orange with white candles, that is already happening. Nancy Metayer Bowen is being honored, her name is being said, her work is being continued by the people she brought into it. She called purpose out of people, and she still is. Her name was Nancy Metayer Bowen. She was 38 years old. She was the first Black and Haitian American woman elected to the Coral Springs City Commission. She survived hurricanes. She led environmental justice efforts across Florida. She had a Johns Hopkins degree and a Florida A&M heart and a community that trusted her the way communities trust people who show up every single day for real. She was the vice mayor. She was 2 days from announcing her run for Congress. She had just buried her brother Joshua, and she was, according to the people who loved her, living in a private reality that none of them could see. Stephen Bowen is in custody, no bond, charged with premeditated murder and evidence tampering. The legal process is moving, the investigation is ongoing. And on Friday, April 3rd, the day that was supposed to be the announcement, hundreds of people stood on the steps of Coral Springs City Hall in orange, with white candles, saying her name, saying what she meant to them, saying what she would have been. Nancy would have won that race. She would have. She would have stood on the floor of the United States House of Representatives and fought for gun control and environmental justice and mental health resources in every community that needed someone to fight. She would have showed up, because that is what Nancy Metayer Bowen did. Every single day, say her name. Nancy Metayer Bowen. She was the light in every room she entered. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, share it everywhere. Leave Nancy's name in the comments. If you or someone you know is in a domestic violence situation, Florida's 24-hour hotline is 800-500-1119. You do not have to be ready to leave to call. Just call for Nancy, because she deserves so much more time. I will see you in the next one.